I'll be honest, when you've spent a few months hunting for a tiny PC that can actually run a game, edit 4K video, or fire off a neural net model, you end up looking at a lot of cheap mini boxes that sound great on paper but turn out to be glorified media players. The regret hits when you finally plug them in, and the system chokes on anything beyond a YouTube video. That's why I wanted to see if the ASUS NUC 14 Pro AI Mini can break that pattern and actually feel like a smarter purchase. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. From the moment I unboxed this thing, the first thing that struck me was how small it really is. It fits in the palm of your hand, yet the chassis feels surprisingly solid, like ASUS didn't try to save weight at the expense of durability. The real test, though, is whether that tiny footprint can hold its own when you push it with real-world workloads: gaming, content creation, and the increasingly common AI-assisted tasks. Let's start with the everyday setup. I placed the NUC on a narrow desk beside a 27-inch 4K monitor, connected a keyboard, a mouse, and ran a single Thunderbolt 4 cable to an external SSD just for backup. Within a few minutes it was up and running Windows 11 Pro, and the first thing I noticed was the speed of the boot. The 1TB PCIe SSD is already lightning fast, so opening a large Photoshop file or loading a game level feels instantaneous. For anyone who's used a slower SATA drive in the past, that jump is immediately noticeable. Now, the category we're dealing with is gaming mini PC. Most people buying a mini form factor think they're getting a portable console replacement, but they also want to keep an eye on the price. The NUC 14 uses an Intel Ultra 7155H, which is essentially a laptop-grade CPU with 16 cores and 22 threads, capable of pushing 4.8 GHz under boost. Couple that with 64 GB of DDR5 RAM, and you have a machine that can juggle multiple VMs, stream a game, and still have headroom for AI inference. In practice, I ran a simultaneous session of OBS for game streaming while editing a 4K clip in DaVinci Resolve, and the system never missed a beat. That kind of multitasking is what the AI Mini PC tagline is really selling. The integrated Intel Arc GPU is the real wildcard here. It's not a dedicated RTX 3080, but for a chip that lives inside the CPU package, it punches above its weight. In titles that are well optimized for DirectX 12 or Vulkan, think Fortnite, Valorant, and Elden Ring at 1080p medium settings, the frame rates are solid, hovering around 6070 frames per second. If you drop the resolution to 1440p, you still get a playable experience, though you'll need to dial down some texture settings. For gamers who don't demand ultra-high settings but want a smooth experience without a bulky tower, that's a compelling proposition. What about the AI claim? The Ultra 7 has built-in AI acceleration blocks, and the Arc GPU adds hardware-level support for tasks like upscaling and inference. I tested a simple Stable Diffusion prompt using the free Stable Diffusion web UI that ships with the NUC. The render time was roughly half of what I saw on a comparable Intel Core i7 laptop without the Arc GPU. It's not going to replace a dedicated workstation for massive model training, but for on-the-fly image generation or AI-enhanced video filters, the performance feels genuinely useful. One of the biggest practical strengths is connectivity. Thunderbolt 4 gives you 40 gigabits per second bandwidth, meaning you can hook up an external GPU enclosure if you ever need that extra graphics punch. The device also sports Wi-Fi 6E, so a fast, low-latency wireless connection is no problem. I connected a 4K HDR monitor via DisplayPort over USB-C, and the colors were vivid, the HDR metadata was respected, and there was no noticeable input lag. For a mini PC, that visual fidelity is impressive. But no product is perfect, and the hidden trade-offs become clearer once you push the NUC for extended periods. The cooling solution is unmatched by ASUS's marketing, and on a typical office desk it stays fairly quiet under light loads. However, when I ran a CPU-heavy benchmark for an hour straight, the fans ramped up and the acoustic level rose to a level you could hear across the room. It never became obnoxious, but it did remind me that the thermal envelope in a 5-inch chassis is limited. In sustained gaming sessions, say, a 2-hour raid in World of Warcraft, the CPU temperature hovered in the high 80s Celsius, and the GPU clock dropped a bit to stay within safe limits. You'll still get good performance, but you won't be extracting the absolute maximum from the silicon. Another practical consideration is upgradability. The NUC uses SODIMM slots for RAM, which means you can upgrade beyond the 64 GB if you're willing to open the case, but the space is cramped and you'll need to purchase DDR5 sticks that are often pricey. The storage is a single M.2 slot, so expanding beyond the 1 TB SSD means swapping